Holy, here we go again, Batman.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to the NerdSync podcast, probably one of our more controversial topics we've ever discussed. So this episode we're going to be talking about changes that we would make to comic book movies. Some of them broad that affect all comic book movies. Some of them very specific to individual comic book movies. And as I said, it's very controversial because we all have different opinions of what qualifies as good and bad. And especially, I'm trying to protect myself here because I'm going to say things pretty much right out of the gate of this episode that's going to make you, that will probably make you upset with me. But just hang in there. I want to talk more about it at the end, but just know that I'm going to say things like I like this movie that most of you guys probably hate, and I'm also going to say that I hate this movie that most of you guys will probably like. And then, of course, there's a pretty big thing at the very start of this episode that's going to make you guys call me out, be like, hey, how can he call himself a comic book nerd if he's never read this comic, if he's never watched this movie? And I want you to know that this week I did it. And we're going to talk more about it at the end. But for some reason, somehow, for most of my life, this movie, this comic book, has eluded me. And I don't know how. I honestly don't know. But I finally sat down and read it and watched it. And we'll talk more about that at the end. But I don't want you to just turn it off after hearing me say that. I'm being vague, but you'll understand immediately what I'm talking about. It's very early on in this episode. So once again, we all have different opinions. And I'm just saying that because I don't want flame wars and things to start in the comment section. I know I'm going to lose people with this podcast, but that's okay because those of you who matter will stick around. And with that said, I guess let's just get right into this episode. So let's talk about comic book movies that we would make some changes in. But first, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Scott.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Bryce.
And Chris, you said you had a good starting off one that you wanted to to start us off with. That's what a starting one does, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Well, this is actually something that could apply to pretty much every comic book movie ever. But I think if they were more faithful to the actual costumes of the characters, it would make 100% of them better.
Really?
All of them. Yes.
Give me some specific. Yeah, give me some examples.
Well, for instance, one that made me very angry was Ghost Rider, the first one with Nick Cage. Blackheart was not what I wanted him to look like. He's supposed to be this monstrous-looking guy, and instead he looks like he belongs in Twilight. You know,
Yeah.
Why? They had all this other stuff. I mean, why?
I want to believe that in somebody's mind, they were like, all right, we have a guy who has a flaming skull riding a motorcycle. That's cool. But I don't really want this kind of monstrous demon guy. Can we just make him look kind of like Twilight-esque? That would be really nice. That'd be an appeal to the ladies. It's too crazy to have him be all, demon-y. Let's just guy in makeup. Flaming skull, by the way, totally acceptable.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see why we can't just follow the source material.
I know, right?
This is what the comic book people, everybody that reads comic books, this is what they know. I understand they're trying to kind of expand it and get everybody kind of into comics because, starting it off, if you throw something too crazy out there, then you might lose some of the more casual people, I guess, that aren't as dedicated to following the storylines, where if you give them something relatable and not totally fantasy, it'll be something that they can relate with more, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I think you're right. That argument about following the storyline or following the source material better is something that I feel like is said a lot about comic book movies. But even when you look at movies that are generally accepted as good, like Iron Man, for instance, Iron Man and his whole origin in that first movie changed a lot up from the comic books, but we were all okay with it because it was just a good movie and like that. Yeah. But at the same time, we don't want I don't know. I'm having a hard time thinking of an example of something that's very close to the source material, but also bad. I guess it's all just an opinion.
A lot of people say that Watchmen wasn't such a great movie. I actually think it's one of the best movies ever made, but a lot of people say that Watchmen was not so great.
Yeah.
That's probably an example.
Yeah, but
Because
I felt like that one did stick like very close to the source material. I don't know.
Panel for panel.
Yeah. I felt like there was one, because I've always heard, all right, full disclosure, guys, I have not seen or read Watchmen. I've tried.
What?
I have tried, guys. I can't do it, and I'm
I went and watched
sorry.
it with my stepdad, and that was probably one of the more awkward experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
Sex scene
the
in
sex
the
scene.
yeah,
With the
and then also
soundtrack Hallelujah in the background
Oh
as well.
yeah, that going on. It was it felt like it was like 20 minutes long. I was like, why is this still happening?
I'll go ahead and give you my nerd card for that one, I guess. But, you know, if it doesn't interest me, there's nothing I can do about it. But I feel like
ignoring the fact that Watchmen is on Time Magazine's top 10 books of all time.
Sure, yeah, no, I get it. I have it right in front of me, staring at me, waiting for me to read it, and I can't. And I don't know why. I mean, but I feel like I've heard that there's a big change in it that's different from the comic books or the comic.
It's the ending. They accomplished the same exact goal that happened in the book. They just replaced it with something a little less comic booky. You haven't seen it, so I don't know if I want to spoil it. But they took something that was very comic booky and replaced it with something very Hollywood.
I think I know the general layout of it. They replaced like some sort of giant squid alien or something. Is that right?
There was there was an elaborate there was an elaborate plot that involved the squid. It was sort of supposed to be a hey, look at this instead of this kind of thing, and that's what the squid was for. But they replaced it with something else in the movie, and it accomplished the exact same goal. Nothing has changed. They just kind of X'd out the squid.
Okay. So they made it more believable, I guess.
It depends on what you...
Believable? Shoulder shrug? Yeah. All right. I'm going to read Watchmen this week. I'm going to try really hard, guys. And then I'll watch the movie.
Yes. I have every version of that movie. I think you should watch the ultimate cut.
Yeah, is it longer? Oh boy, yeah, Chris. Yes, it is. It's like
Braveheart long. It's like 4 hours.
Oh gosh, I'm not gonna, Chris. I'm not gonna watch that. I'm sorry, I can't.
Oh man, I think I like movies more than you do.
I think you like that movie more than I do. I'll give you that one. I can't do that. Maybe if I really, really enjoy the comic book more than I thought I would. I tried. I honestly tried. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, I think you're right about the costumes needing to be more faithful, because I feel like this is to an extent though, because if we saw Captain America's costume with like the red pirate boots that have, and then like the wings on his head, that's a little weird, and I wouldn't be a fan of that. Even Captain America's costume in Avengers was odd to me. It didn't look like it fit in or belonged there. But Winter Soldier did a really good job of his like all blue kind of stealth suit. I thought was really awesome. But Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, for instance, the first movie of Amazing Spider-Man had that weird kind of suit where he had sunglasses for his eyes, and then it was just all these crazy weird patterns of spandex, and I wasn't a fan. His head looked like a basketball to me, and yeah. But then Amazing Spider-Man 2 had more of a classic design to the costume, and I think that looked better. I think there's some costumes that just inherently look better on film than others would, right?
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. The whole sunglasses, like bulgy eyes almost look. It just I don't know. I haven't even read the Spider-Man comics, and I thought that was just very.
He's wearing sunglasses at night for most of the movie. It's like it's not effective for crime fighting. I guess he could always just rely on his spider sense. Sure, whatever, if you want to play it off that way. But it's like, I don't know. I wasn't a fan of sunglasses eyes. Who cares what they're called?
Well, I think with source material, because I kind of had a point that I wanted to make with that too, and that was that as a person who doesn't read very many comics and did not grow up reading comics, but as somebody who's trying to kind of get into them now, I've read articles online that tell me about the origin stories of characters and, what they're like and their personality and stuff like that. But when I go and see the film adaptation of it, I'm expecting to get kind of like the quote unquote like true story of that character, which is already kind of messed up because there's so many different story arcs now, different origin stories for each character. But I would almost like to see, just movies that actually follow pretty closely the storylines from the comic.
Just like one storyline actually adapted into a movie instead of taking inspiration from just like an exact copy. That would be interesting.
Green Lantern movie.
You're really pushing for that White Lantern thing, huh?
I really want them to do some sort of a reboot with Kyle Rayner and get that White Lantern storyline in there.
You know what? I'm behind you on that. Let's start a hashtag.
Hashtag Kyle Rayner movie?
Yeah, why not? Keep it simple.
Hashtag Kyle Rayner movie.
Hashtag Kyle Rayner movie. That works for me. I feel like the only comic book movies that do that are movies that are based off of comic book, like graphic novels or things like that.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, things that don't have 50 plus years of continuity to take inspiration from. They're just, maybe 6 issues of a comic series, like a short series or a graphic novel. Like Scott Pilgrim was really good.
Kick-Ass.
Kick-Ass. Well, I haven't seen the second one yet, but
I thought it was great.
I've heard mixed reviews, but oh well, I'll see it for myself.
Don't listen to them.
All right, that's on my watch list. I'm gonna read Watchmen, watch Watchmen, and then watch Kick-Ass 2 because I've already read Kick-Ass 2, so I think I'm good in that area. I have a busy week ahead of me, guys. And I also want to watch Captain America 2 again. So,
kind of the reason I brought up Green Lantern again was, and I will cut this completely out if I'm wrong.
Sure.
Green Lantern movie?
You have to leave it in.
Dang it. The one that they just made a little while back, a couple of years back, wasn't that supposed to be an original, like, had nothing to do with any of the actual Green Lanterns from the comic books? It was a new character, essentially?
No.
Okay, it wasn't?
No, that was Hal Jordan.
He was supposed to be Hal Jordan. I didn't.
His name was
Hal
Jordan.
Now you see how terrible it was.
Yeah, I saw it once, and I could not remember that his name was Hal Jordan.
So this is how we fix the Green Lantern movie. Make sure that he is always wearing a name tag that says Hal Jordan, so that Bryce
or
can
make
tell.
sure he's actually wearing his costume.
And not like
give him a costume.
That's how I would fix comic book movies, is just to make sure that unless you're a completely CGI character, like someone like the Hulk, or any sort of alien type army, like whatever, unless you're an all CG character, just wear a costume. How much money are you saving by not making a costume, or are you spending more money by making a CG costume?
I mean, that's what I was thinking is, what was it we talked about a couple podcasts ago? Could you imagine being the guy that gets paid to keep track of the stubble on Ryan Reynolds' face?
Yeah.
As he goes from scene to scene, because like there's so much CGI going on that they control like every aspect of everything. Like, how many people do you have to pay to keep track of all of that CGI?
Well, that's actually another thing I was going to say. I think more practical effects in movies, just like they did in Indiana Jones, for instance, would make them better. We don't want everything to look so fake because it costs money also.
Yeah. And I watched a lot of behind the scenes stuff on Avengers, and a lot of it was green screen CGI stuff. Obviously you need that, but a lot of the destruction and like car explosions and stuff like that, a lot of that was done impractically, which was really cool. And of course, Guillermo del Toro, anything that he does a lot of practical effects. He built like the insides of the Pacific Rim robots. That was really cool. And of course, it relates back to comic books because Hellboy, and those were awesome movies. Yeah.
Yes, they were both very good.
And again, practical effects for the characters a lot of the time as well, instead of yeah.
And I mean, and this goes kind of out of the realm of comic books and more into the realm of literature, but it's definitely still a nerdy thing. But like Lord of the Rings, one of the criticisms that I hear all the time between Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies is the orcs. And it's because the orcs looked so cool when like you just had a bunch of extras with their faces all painted up, and they all looked unique and really interesting because they had a bunch of different artists do the like facial art and stuff like that. and it was so cool. Now I know CGI was used to make the millions when there were giant armies, but up close stuff, that was really neat to see. But now, like in the Hobbit movies, they've transferred it all over to CGI, and there's a lot of people complaining, and I'm honestly one of those people. I would much rather see extras in costume, standing around, dancing around, running around, killing, doing whatever, than all of this CGI that is happening.
Yeah, I think in terms of anything that has to do with monsters, and especially Lord of the Rings and alien type stuff, I think a lot of the times it looks a lot better if it's just people in like prosthetics and makeup instead of CGI. And especially if you're trying to do something scary like orcs, I think it's scarier when you can tell that it's a real person in makeup versus just a CGI thing. Because I don't know if it's just us, the kind of generation that is growing up with advancements to CGI and stuff like that. But it's still to this day, a lot of the times pretty obvious when something is and isn't CG. And you'll get things that'll be like, whoa, I didn't know that was CG. That's pretty impressive. But a lot of times if it's like a character, like Hulk looks pretty good in Avengers, but you can still tell that he's CG. Obviously, because nobody's that big in real life, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that definitely I think that has to be just a generational thing. Well, I don't know if it really is, but we can definitely still tell, if like the edges, how crisp everything is, you just know that something's CGI.
Right.
I have a huge throwback reference on that vein.
Go for it.
One of my favorite underrated comic book movies of all time, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Oh, okay. I knew you were going to bring this up.
You did.
Yeah, I assumed you were going. I assumed because in my mind I was like, you know what? A good example of someone who's big. I was thinking Jekyll and Hyde. Were you going to go for Jekyll and Hyde? Or
well, I did read that book, by the way, Jekyll and Hyde, but. No, I was going to say more specifically the fact that a lot of it, when I saw it at the time, I was in middle school, and a lot of it, I was like, wow, that's so real. It doesn't look like they made any of this up. It looks like all of these characters that I've read, like Captain Nemo and Tom Sawyer, Wilhelmina Harker from Dracula, obviously, they're all really brought to life. I felt like it was very, very down to earth and real, as opposed to other movies where it's like, oh yeah, that's obviously fake.
Yeah, and I will say that I know League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is pretty much one of the, I would assume, one of the most hated comic book movies of all time. And right. I know that you're a big fan of it. And I know that for some reason I am also a big fan of it, and I know that
it's Sean Connery, man. Sean Connery and Tom Sawyer chase Dr. Jekyll.
That now I have said two things in this podcast that will make people feel like I'm an idiot. Number one, that I haven't read or watched Watchmen, and number two, that I did enjoy League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and own a copy of it to this day. So
stick with me on this. Tell me if this sounds terrible to you. Sean Connery and grown-up Tom Sawyer chase Mr. Hyde through a steampunk city. Can you tell me that is not interesting?
It is interesting. Like, the concepts are always interesting, but a lot of people nitpick and I don't know.
It's interesting, like bizarre interesting. Like, where did this come from? Kind of interesting.
I was a fan, and I'm not going to go into any further because we have other topics to talk about. So, everyone just yell at us in the comments about how wrong we are, because that's going to happen. Chris,
I'll admit I've never actually seen the movie, so...
Okay. Well, you should, so you can jump on the bandwagon of us, and then we can try to get people to like it, I guess. I don't know. I haven't seen it in a really long time. Maybe my memory's playing tricks with me. But no, I definitely remember enjoying it. So I have a couple specifics for movies that I would fix that I think would be interesting. Now, we originally had this planned out to be movies that were like bad comic book movies and how we would fix those specifically. But then I just kind of went to movies that I personally wasn't a fan of, and here's why I want these things to change. So the first big one, probably controversial. Again, I'm going to say a lot of things in this podcast that's going to make people hate me. But I wasn't a big fan of Dark Knight Rises. And
ooh,
yeah, were you a fan? I assume most of you guys were fans.
I really liked all of the Nolan trilogy, to be honest.
I have
I
a
thought
poster
they were-
in my room, Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they were honestly like the best Batman movies I've seen.
I love Batman Begins and I love The Dark Knight, but I don't like The Dark Knight Rises. I can't do it.
I guess my biggest criticism of that though is I have such mixed feelings because I thought it was a pretty good movie, but when Bane came out the way he did, I just no.
So here's what I would change.
Oh.
Yeah, here's what I would change about The Dark Knight Rises. So The Dark Knight set it up pretty well for a future movie to be really interesting. You know, they had Joker do all this stuff, and Harvey Dent went kind of evil, and then Batman was like, "Well, I'll take responsibility for all the evil that Harvey Dent's done, so that the public can see him as a good guy and they'll see me as a bad guy." All of a sudden, you know, you have him in the last kind of battle scene beating up doctors, and you know, obviously they were Joker's thugs and everything, but they were dressed as doctors. It could be very simple for somebody to get footage of that and be like, "Look at Batman beating up all these doctors. Isn't he a bad guy?" And then you have it set up so great for a third movie of Batman just like versus the Gotham City Police Department, where you don't need a new villain. Batman is the villain of that movie. I just think it'd be a really cool dynamic to have, like, Batman trying to do his detective thing, because he's the world's greatest detective, trying to solve some sort of mystery, and then you have the Gotham trying to chase after him as he is the bad guy. I don't need Bane in that movie. I just need Batman doing Batman things against the general public. That would be cool.
Well, I will say this in Christopher Nolan's defense. I agree with you that Bane was kind of eh. I mean, even though I'm a big fan of Tom Hardy and I think he rocked the house as Bane, but I think had Heath Ledger not died, Christopher Nolan was setting us up for the best Batman movie that will ever be made, or ever have been and will be made. But Heath Ledger passed away, sadly. You know, we'll never know exactly why, but we know that he did. And I think had he been around, it would have been a mind-blowing Batman experience.
Yeah. Do you think it would have been Batman versus, like, everyone now sees Batman as a villain, they see Joker obviously as a villain, and then, I don't know. I just like that idea of the public seeing of the public seeing Batman as a bad guy, and then he has to do all these things that he thinks are right, but everyone's like, "Oh, look at Batman. Look, he's so evil." But then in The Dark Knight Rises, 15 minutes in, everyone's like, "Where's Batman at? We need Batman back." It's like, I don't know about that, but I feel like there should be something that happened because of what happened in The Dark Knight, and I didn't really feel that. So,
well, he went into a recluse mode.
Yeah, sure, but the public didn't care. They were just like, "Batman, oh, he's evil. I don't really care. We need Batman back. Let's get Batman."
Dang it! I guess we need Batman back.
Yeah,
yeah. I could see kind of what you're saying there, though, Scott. And it would actually be interesting to see kind of similar to almost what Bane did, where he like released the prisoners and he was like, "This is your city, take it back, you know, blah, 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 fight the power." When everybody was seeing Batman as a hero, I could see a villain rising up, maybe even Joker. Like how Bane gave the letter, or put the letter from Gordon on
from
live
Dent.
TV.
Yeah,
so,
Gordon, talking about the Dent stuff.
But yeah, I could see a villain, maybe even like the Joker, rising up and being like, "Hey, it looked like I was doing all this evil stuff, but I'm really innocent, and I was just trying to prove how evil Batman really is, and you guys just aren't seeing it." And as manipulative as Joker is, I feel like he could have pulled some strings somewhere, or had a front man be like this new rising hero that's like, "Gotham PD and everyone in charge are all corrupt. Look at this letter that I have, you know,
anarchy.
What are you doing?" Yeah, complete anarchy breaks out. All of a sudden, villains rule the city, which is almost what they did.
Which is kind of what happened. Yeah, but
he broke out a bunch of prisoners. So.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I had written down, not to go back too much into it, what I had written down is that there's a comic book right now called Batman Eternal, and in it, Gordon goes to jail, and Batman's trying to solve the mystery of like, well, I know Gordon didn't do this, so now I got to go into detective mode and figure out what happened. And meanwhile, there's this new guy that kind of takes over Gotham, takes over Gordon's role,
And also, there's a lot of corruption in the police department, so everyone's like, Batman's evil. Let's try to capture Batman and kill Batman. And I feel like that would have fit almost like super perfectly into that world that they set up at the end of Dark Knight. I don't know. That's just me. Anybody else have anything?
I have kind of a small thing that I don't think we'll end up talking for an hour about.
Sure.
I don't think everybody will agree with me on this one, but I think if there were better soundtracks to comic book movies, they would improve the bad ones. Because you have bad movies like Daredevil, which is a pretty good movie, but did not see the success it would have with a great soundtrack. And then you have movies that come out nowadays where the soundtrack is basically just serviceable.
Did Daredevil have a good soundtrack though?
It did.
Did
it had
it
a great
though?
soundtrack.
Are you
It
sure?
did. Yes.
I wasn't a fan.
Yeah. Well, who cares?
I'm gonna be honest. That was so long ago. I can't even
Was
remember
it-
what the soundtrack was.
Was it Evanescence or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Scott, do you even music?
I do music, but come on.
Evanescence was really big at that time.
At that time, sure.
Yeah, it wouldn't hold up today, obviously, because it would with some people, but not with.
If you
the
go
main-
back and watch that, because I did for the Daredevil Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode, if you go
Right.
back and watch it, it's so goofy with that music in it. I don't know. That's just me. I don't know.
I thought it was cool, but my point still stands. I think if they had more higher quality or inspired soundtracks, that movies would be better. Like, I hate to keep crushing on this one movie, but Thor: The Dark World, I was not a fan. I thought it was mediocre at best.
Same
I
here.
thought maybe, they could have injected something a little more inspired into that. Like what if the movie had a much better soundtrack? Would that have made it better?
I wrote down a couple fixes I would do to Thor 2. You guys are like doing general comic book stuff. I wrote down exactly what I wanted changed in different comic book movies. So with Thor 2, my biggest solution to fix that movie, because I also wasn't a big fan, is just don't go to Earth. Just stop. Everything is so much cooler in the other realms. Like, do something in another realm for more. Like the big action sequence at the end, a lot of it in the kind of the beginning with Jane Foster, a lot of the movie takes place on Earth, and I just wanted to not go to Earth at all. And that way it would explain easily why there was no like Avengers or Shield assistance of any kind or anything, because it wasn't on Earth, and I thought that would have been better, I guess.
I don't know. I think they did it on Earth specifically to get kind of like that emotional appeal. Like, oh my goodness, these are real places that we've seen, maybe not in person,
No.
but on the internet.
Sure. I mean, that's like why they would do Avengers in New York, because number one, it's like a big city that a lot of us Americans and a lot of foreign people could probably like understand, like, oh, that's a big deal. Maybe I'm not a foreigner, I don't know. But also, it's the thing about a lot of comic books take place in New York, so that's a good setting for that. But I don't know where did Thor 2 take place on Earth? Was that like Paris or France of some
Spain?
kind? Spain?
Was it Spain?
He was somewhere
It
in
was
Europe.
somewhere.
Yeah, all of our European listener, all one of them, is saying they know exactly where it is, and
Yeah, they're probably like, why are you guys not getting this? That was such a big
America's not great at geography. We know where the Grand Canyon is. No, I don't even know where the Grand Canyon is, guys.
Arizona.
You say with a question mark at the end of it. You don't know either. You're not confident enough to say.
Going to Google it.
Yeah, see, that's exactly right.
What's wrong with you two?
What is it, in Colorado? That's not off. That's way off. What is it?
Like 5 different states. And Arizona is one of them.
Okay, so we got that. Do you know all the 5 states, Bryce? Mr. I know everything.
Exactly, but I know that Arizona is the big one that people visit because of Flagstaff.
I've never heard. What is that? Who cares at this point? I don't get out of my house. Look at how white I am, Bryce. Oh boy.
You fit almost all the descriptions for Weird Al Yankovic's White and Dirty.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
edit Wikipedia like you posted on
I
Facebook
did. I
earlier.
recently edited Wikipedia. That's true. I've been browsing, inspecting X-Men comics. I would collect them. Yeah, that fits.
You're a Dungeons and Dragons too.
I did play Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. I don't do a lot of the stuff. I don't have my name on my underwear. I've never been to a Renaissance fair.
We don't know that. You've been to Dragon Con. That's good enough.
Is that close? That's close. Who cares? They didn't say anything about cosplay in that song. Maybe we should go back and edit it ourselves. White and Nerdy 2.0. Yeah, I really just had very specific things, and I'm gonna touch on them really quickly again. So Iron Man 3, I thought it would be really cool if, I know this was said a lot, if he actually fought the real Mandarin and not Trevor. That would be cool. That'd be simple fix, and I think it would be cool to say that he got his powers from one of the Infinity Stones or something, and that would tie Iron Man 3 back into that kind of storyline. So that was my thought.
Well, aren't they fixing that? I believe they said that the real Mandarin is actually going to be not the other Mandarin that we thought was Mandarin, but really wasn't.
Yeah, there was a one shot called like All Hail the King or something similar to that, and it involved Trevor Slattery in jail, and people were like basically telling him
jeering. They were jeering at him.
Yeah. Well, there was some other people that came in and said there's a real Mandarin and he's upset that you took his name or something like that, to that extent. So they put it out there that there is a real Mandarin to kind of make fans a little bit happy, I guess, which is a smart move, but it's a shame that we'll probably never get to see him on screen.
And my biggest problem with that is, though, Mandarin, is it 9 rings, 10 rings?
It's a 10 rings.
Okay, it's 10 rings. I'm not that literate in that area.
Yeah, okay, but you know where the Grand Canyon is.
Yeah, because that's a real place, Scott.
You shut up. Anything in my mind is real.
But the 10 rings thing, you saw in the movie posters for that he had the 10 rings. You saw him on the press video that was like released on national TV in the movies that he had the 10 rings. But then now Yeah. Was that a coincidence that he had those, or did he really base that off of some other guy that he had actually heard of previously who was actually Mandarin? And then on top of that, this other Mandarin was actually famous enough that he found out about it and duplicated the 10 rings, but nobody else knew who the Mandarin was until this guy pretended to be the Mandarin.
I'm not even going to pretend I followed that at all, but
just logic. It just doesn't.
All I'm gonna say is the 10 rings thing was hinted at very heavily in Iron Man 1, because that was the terrorist organization, was called the 10 Rings, and there was that guy who was always like playing with his ring or whatever, and so everyone was like, "Oh, that's cool. There's gonna be like a build up to Mandarin," and then that finally kind of happened. Yeah, and then it was just very disappointing. And I also was disappointed with the fact that it was the third movie. I'm glad that they didn't put another guy in a giant robot suit to fight him. Whatever, that's fine. I'm glad we didn't see that again as we saw in the first two, but it still kind of echoed back to the first two movies with the fact that the biggest villain of the movie is just another rival company owner guy. So Obadiah Stane was a part of Stark, whatever, but he was still like a rival businessman, and that's what all the villains have been in Iron Man. It's just businessmen, and that wasn't as interesting as like an actual terrorist guy.
It was quite a letdown.
It was disappointing. I did have to say the last one that I had was X-Men 3: The Last Stand.
Oh boy, let's not even.
No, here's the good, because I had a hard time thinking of like what are actual bad movies that I think I could fix. Couldn't come up with any of them except X-Men 3: Last Stand. I think it would be better if they took out the whole plot about the Phoenix Force, because
the whole movie.
No, because there were two plots to that movie. The first plot was like the serum that would cure mutants and everything, and like they had to go get that little boy because he was like the whatever thing that made the serum. Who cares? And then there was the Phoenix Force, which kind of was, I guess, the big bad of the movie. And that kind of took away from it. It took Cyclops away from us, which I know it wasn't that they didn't write him out on purpose. He couldn't have time to do the movie. But it also,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think he was busy with Superman Returns, because that worked out well.
Screw it.
Yeah, I know, right?
Why?
Who
Superman
cares?
Returns kind of failed too, so that's like, well, dude, you ruined it. You done goofed.
Yeah. It also killed Professor X, which was sad. But I feel like it would have been much cooler to take away the Phoenix Force and just focus on the story of the public really hating mutants. Because in the first couple movies, we kind of get a glimpse of that, just like, oh, the public hates mutants. But if we had a full movie that was just dedicated to just like, we hate mutants, we want to cure mutants, and we want to, and then we have like, again, I don't know, because I guess now that I think about it, they kind of did a similar thing in the first movie. Is that like the opposite of the first movie, where the mutants try to? Yeah, okay. So in the first movie, the Magneto tried to make all the humans mutants, and then in the third movie, the humans tried to make all the mutants human. I don't know what to say now.
Now Scott has run into some logic.
And now I've hit some walls.
He has logicked himself into a little hole.
Because I was just talking about how I hated that the Iron Man movies echoed the same similar plot throughout them, and now I'm just like, you know what would be better if the X-Men did the same plot as they did in the first movie? And yeah. So that's bad.
I mean, yeah, that would, if they just cut the Phoenix Force out altogether, that would have cleared up so many continuity errors that were caused. And then we wouldn't have to try to explain away, wait, how did Professor X come back?
Right. Or why was he standing as Patrick Stewart in the flashback scene when he meets Jean Grey for the first time, but he was paralyzed as James McAvoy in First Class? That's another continuity thing that they could have fixed by not doing the Phoenix Force. I mean, I didn't mind the Phoenix Force thing, but I feel like there were two plots and they could have just chosen one and the movie would have been better. That was my thinking about it.
I mean, I know how you feel about Anna Paquin, but when she comes in...
Yeah, sorry. That was my Anna Paquin impression from True Blood. Just bail!
When she comes in as Rogue, and she actually does that line really well, where she comes in and she's like, oh my gosh, they have a cure for this mutant disease that we have? Mm-hmm. You know, this is incredible. This is wonderful. And then everybody else is like, no, this is terrible. Why would you say this is a good thing? And she flips out because she's like, I can't even touch anyone. I can't have any physical contact with anyone that I love whatsoever. But she kind of delivers that line actually really well and with such emotion about wanting to, you know, just be able to be normal, that I feel like if they would have not focused on the Phoenix Force as much.
Well, I think they did really well with the whole deep... if they did that movie where it was just the mutants trying to defend themselves against a cure and no Phoenix Force, I would think it would have been a really cool movie that dove into some topics. Like in X2, there was that really great scene where Bobby kind of like came out to his parents like, hey, I'm a mutant, and like they were reacting all crazy like, whoa, what is this? I don't like this. Can you change? Can you stop being a mutant? That'd be great. Thanks. And I feel like that was one of my favorite parts of that movie, and I wanted them to explore that a little bit further, of just everybody trying to be like, hey, I'm a mutant, and the world wants me to change, but you know what? I can't, and I'm not going to. But then all of a sudden they're like, hey, we have this cure if you want to, and now everyone's kind of having this inner struggle with, do I want to fit in and be normal with everybody else, or do I want to continue being this mutant, this thing that separates me, that makes me feel special, or whatever? And that would have been, I don't know, it wouldn't have been as action-packed as people would want from like a X-Men movie, but it would have been cool to explore at least a little bit.
And really kind of looked at that divide between like which ones of the mutants find their powers to be really cool and useful and want to stay mutants and think this cure is a terrible thing, and which one of them's like Rogue, for instance, where that conflicts with her, you know, everyday life, that she wants to become normal. And if they would have really followed that line, I feel like they could have, you know, they could have done really well.
I have a solution to her problem. It comes straight out of the movie Batman and Robin. If you want to kiss somebody but you don't want to touch their lips, you buy rubber lips, and that solves everything, apparently.
Other movie things that probably just did not need to exist.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a good Batman movie to exist, we need the most cartoon sound effects possible when people get hit and fall down. Is that not how you guys feel?
I'm not going to say anything, because while I fully agree that Batman and Robin was not an Oscar-winning movie per se,
no,
I kind of like it.
Batman and Robin is enjoyable for the fact that it's so weird and funny and bizarre and ice puns all over the place, and I'll watch it because it makes me laugh. But like something I consider a bad movie something that can't get me engaged. So for like Dark Knight Rises, I wasn't a fan because I got bored. But like
I think
Iron
you
Man,
actually told me you fell asleep in that movie.
I was there. I was about there. But Iron Man 3, I watched again. I'm disappointed by it, but it's not a terrible movie. It's not a great movie to me, but it's still fun. There's lots of action and explosions, and it keeps you engaged. So that's nice, I guess. I'm really just trying to fix the fact that I feel like at this point in the podcast, people think I'm a terrible person for hating the things that they like and liking the things that they hate. So,
Well, I don't know. Batman and Robin is one of those movies for me that I just kind of grew up with. Like, for example, my little brother used to have trouble falling asleep, and one of his movies that he would watch to help him fall asleep was Batman and Robin. So I've seen that movie approximately infinity times. You know,
gotcha.
But I think director Joel Schumacher, did a good job at trying. You know, like I said, it didn't bring home any Academy Awards, but I think as far as Batman goes and the whole theme of Batman and the whole Adam West, it's not quite that serious kind of feel. I think Joel Schumacher did a good E for effort kind of job. He did the best he could because he was strong-armed into making a kid-friendly movie. Remember, we can't forget that.
I kind of grew up on it, and so
Right.
it was totally a mystery to me when people started, like, when I brought it up 10 years later, and
Right.
everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that was an awful movie," and I'm like, "Whoa."
I had the same experience when I first got into the whole internet thing. They were like, "What? No, that movie should be burned." And I'm like, "Why? I liked it. I thought we liked that movie, didn't we?"
Yeah, and then I was like, "But dude, it had Arnold Schwarzenegger as
Well, that's how I felt about. Yeah, that's how I felt about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Because I was like, yeah, this is a fun movie. I watched it a bunch. And then internet happened. And I'm like, wait, what? Okay, so the internet happened before that movie, obviously. But I wasn't on the internet before I watched that movie. And so I just assumed that, hey, this movie's great. It was recommended to me by a whole bunch of my friends. So I just assumed that people liked this movie. And apparently that is not the case. And I didn't even find that out until like 2 years ago that this movie was apparently bad.
That makes me really wonder if we only like and dislike certain things sometimes based on trends.
Yeah.
Because
it's the truth.
If your friends liked it and your circle of friends all liked it and they brought it to your attention and you liked it and then you brought it to other people's attention and they liked it, you know, that's a great thing when you're in your own little bubble. But if you get outside that bubble and find out that the rest of the country doesn't like it, then you're like, oh yeah, that was a bad movie. I totally didn't like that at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it even works, I think, adversely a little bit, where people are like, hey, Batman is so cool. I love Batman. Batman movies and comic books are so cool. And then all of a sudden you'll get people like, well, I don't want to be in that. I want to be different. So I hate Batman. And Batman is terrible. And I'm like...
He's not even a superhero. He has no superpowers.
Exactly, that kind of thing. And because the two people I've heard throughout life that have told me that they don't like Batman are also two people that have never read a Batman comic book. And I hate to be that guy that I'll be like, well, you got to read comic books to be the fan of. Well, I mean, I just feel like if you're not giving him a chance. No, this is different than that, Chris. This is different because I was saying you don't need to read comics to be a fan, and what I'm saying now is you really do need to actually read something in order to criticize it. You can't just make blind judgments.
You're entirely correct, because you can't say I've never had barbecue before and then say barbecue is terrible. Well, it's like, well, have you tried it? You
Right.
know?
Yeah, exactly.
So that was our conversation, guys, and I really want to touch on Watchmen really quickly because that was the thing that was kind of bugging me throughout this whole podcast, as I was hoping you guys wouldn't think too badly of me that I hadn't sat down and read it or watched it. And I only have the comic book because my brother took a class on comic books in college, and obviously Watchmen's very influential, very important comic book, and so I felt bad having it just sit there and having me not read it. And I always say that I'm probably I am the most unqualified person to be talking about comic books on the internet, but I think that provides me an advantage because I haven't read everything, obviously. As you can tell, I haven't even read the most important things in terms of comic books. But for me, it's great because that means that every day I get to think about, oh man, these are all the comic books that I need to read in order to get this big grasp and understanding of the world. And, I was raised on comic books through my dad, but I rarely read actual comic books until just a couple years ago. So I have a ton of catching up to do. And, that goes along with my thing about me being super unqualified. I have so many comic books just that I buy in volumes that I eventually want to someday read, and also try to keep up with the comic books that are going out right now. But anyway, like I was saying, I hope you didn't judge me too bad for not having read that. I did finally read it, and I watched the movie as well, and it's pretty good. Not bad. Not bad at all. But this isn't a review of that, so it doesn't really matter. After listening back to this episode, I kind of want to spin it around, do a follow-up episode about not just what we think are bad about comic book movies, but flip it around and say, these are the best parts of the best comic book movies, or even the best parts of bad comic book movies. Because even a lot of terrible movies, comic book or otherwise, still have good parts in them. So I kind of want to maybe do a follow-up episode of just us saying, like, this is one of my favorite things, instead of, I like being positive instead of negative. I felt like this episode was kind of negative, and I didn't want to leave you with that. So I don't know. Tell me what you guys think, and you can always hit us up in the comments on YouTube. We also have Facebook.com/NerdSync Productions. We also have Twitter. You can follow us at NerdSync, and you can follow me at Scott Niswander if you want to do that. I don't know why you would, but I'm also trying to get Bryce and Chris to use their Twitters more. I know Bryce is starting to do that. He's at Renny of Yore, RENNYOFYORE. And then there's Chris, who is Chris_Tuffer, TUFFER, like Chris Tuffer. You'll figure it out. And so just follow everyone on there. I'm trying to really get them to use the internet more. But let me know what you guys think. What movies would you fix, or what would you fix as a whole in terms of comic book movies and all that jazz? Maybe even comic book TV shows. We didn't even talk about that. What would you fix on all sorts of comic books and other mediums? So let me know on all the places that I just said that we are on the internet. And we'll see you right here next week for more of the NerdSync podcast. See ya.